All right. Happy Monday, everybody. It's great to see you all on this Monday evening for our SC Codes Mentor Mondays. I am Leah King. I am Executive Director of Build Carolina, the nonprofit that helps to run SC Codes. And we are very excited that we have one of our amazing SC Codes mentors here tonight to answer your questions and share a little bit about his story with you. We have John Miller here, who is with Microsoft, Principal Consultant, and he is also one of our mentors who is helping folks out on the platform, on our Slack channel. He was just about to start an in-person class right before all this coronavirus stuff happened, so please help me to welcome John here in just a moment. Yeah, it's so great to have you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I've gotten to meet some people in person throughout Lexington and Richland County, so chance to meet some more people online. I love it.
Well, we're thrilled that you are available for all of our learners, who are online all the time with SC Codes, and of course for tonight. It's great to see your face and kind of be able to talk to you live. And one of these days when things return to normal, whatever normal will be after this, hopefully we'll be able to also have you in person with some of our folks at one of the local libraries.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, I, of course, want to kind of get into a bit of your story. But first, let me just say for our viewers that we do have our chat open. And more than anything, John is here to answer questions and talk to you guys about kind of where you are in your learning and your pathway to learning to code. And so we're definitely here and open to do that. So if you're watching us, feel free to hop over to the chat and just introduce yourself and let us know maybe where you live and kind of where you are in your learning journey with SC Codes or with coding in general. So with that, John, will you kind of take us a little bit through your education and your career path and how did you end up being at Microsoft?
Sure. So thinking about this a little bit. Started 20 years ago. So in college, I was always kind of a math nerd. And thought to myself, oh, I'll just go the engineering track. That makes the most sense. And so that worked well until I took differential equations. And I think in 4 or 5 weeks of that class, I maybe earned 1 or 2 points across all of the homework and quizzes and tests. So kind of learned, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not cut out for engineering. So I thought to myself, all right, well, that was too hard. I'll do computer science. And so at the university, they had a modern math class that you had to take. And so that was full of proofs and things like that. And I think maybe second or third week, they're like, okay, today we're going to prove that zero exists. And I walked out and I said, yeah, maybe computer science isn't for me either. So I ended up actually studying finance, sticking with the numbers theme. I had an interest in computers. I, loved, doing the spreadsheets, building the models, doing all of that kind of stuff. And was relatively good at that. Unluckily for me, I graduated in 2000, so just as the kind of tech boom back then was crashing in on itself. So tried to find a job I could get, kind of part-time jobs doing some inventory accounting or doing, medical accounting or different things like this, but just couldn't get, full-time jobs. So I thought to myself, okay, it's just the economy. I'll go back to school. I really want to get back into technology. These jobs aren't quite where I want to be. So I went back to study information security. 9/11 happened the second week I was in grad school. So just kind of killed whatever was left of the tech industry after the tech boom right away. And so, managed to finish my studies and was just really hustling to try to get a job. And I think, in talking with people today and seeing those who are successful and thinking back on that, it is a contact sport. Thinking back, I must have contacted 200 companies to get 2 or 3 responses back. And so ended up getting a job with a small 6 guys in an apartment company in Atlanta. Um, Worked there for a little bit. Love that job. I can't say enough about working at small companies. You get a chance to learn so much because there's only 4 or 5 of you. So you're the email guy, you're the database guy, you're the programmer, you're customer support. If you know how to paint, you're household maintenance. You really, I learned so much there, and I'm so grateful. And from there, I kind of moved to Florida for a couple years. I'm originally from South Florida, and so did some consulting for hospital firms, and ended up moving to kind of a larger insurance firm there. And I think just like with moving, up in bigger companies have bigger problems. So on one hand, that's really interesting for technology. It's like, oh, now instead of dealing with 15 customers, I'm dealing with 150 or 1,500 or something like that. And so new problems. I think one of the things that was definitely, something that I had to kind of learn through and grow through is while you do get to take on bigger problems, your view of the problem gets smaller. I need you to be the login expert for these 50,000 people, maybe not the end-to-end expert. So got a lot of exposure to a lot of different companies. And actually from the small company to those bigger companies, they were all Microsoft partners. So they were, encouraging me to build on their platform, encouraging me to get those certifications, things like that. So took every advantage. I think that's one of the joys of being young. You've got extra time or extra energy. So really just any chance I could to get a certification, to go to a code camp, or, to take training, I took. Just not necessarily having a well-defined career path, but, taking every opportunity to see what would work. So around, I guess it was 2005 was when Ivan and Katrina and all of those hurricanes kind of hit Florida, hit New Orleans, things like that. And so as part of that, I was working with the company to go through our disaster recovery operations. So they had a site on the West Coast, so far away from any hurricanes, where we basically did a full backup and restore, brought all of our operations up on Monday morning. 8 a.m. we were up taking calls, and we had multiple customers say like, "Oh, I thought you guys were in Florida," and we're like, "Oh no, like we're up and running somewhere else." Really, really cool opportunity. Really a chance to get to see, what it takes to rebuild a business over a weekend type thing. And out of that, actually, I got contacted by a larger firm out of DC. They were working with FEMA at the time, a couple years later. And they said, "Oh, hey, we see you have experience with disaster recovery. We have a contract with FEMA, and we're going through kind of the post-Katrina reshuffle that they went through." And so I ended up moving to DC and working with federal agencies, which is both incredibly motivating and incredibly inspirational because you can really make a difference for so many people, but also incredibly frustrating because you're working at the speed of federal bureaucracy. So worked on a lot of cool projects, both with FEMA and other agencies, and we can kind of dig into that. And from there ended up moving to Microsoft. They were looking for someone who had federal experience, who had experience with their platform. And at the time I literally lived 2 blocks from the Microsoft office. So it was kind of one of those times where I said, if I'm not the best candidate, I'm going to kick myself for years if I never try. So applied to Microsoft, had a great interview, and have been there the past 9 years.
Wow. What a story that you probably didn't know it was going to all kind of turn out that way when you started this journey.
No. And it was funny, like I said, starting out in 2001, it felt like it was just a fight just to get that job, keep that job, get a foot in the door. And definitely a lot of stress, and just thinking about, how many calls I was putting out, going through all the job websites, no LinkedIn back then. So just
right.
all the different things you were doing. Actually, my uncle gave me advice to handwrite letters, go through the Chamber of Commerce and get addresses and handwrite letters, because someone will have to open them at least once before they throw your resume away. So it really is a contact sport. And throughout my career, I think I've gotten the most growth when I was out making that contact, whether, like I said, in person at code camps or training or things like that, or online via LinkedIn or GitHub or whatever platforms. So,
Right.
Definitely something people need to be thinking about these days.
Well, so you live and work in South Carolina as
Yes.
a developer.
Yes.
That is something that, I think I get a lot of questions about, as far as, wow, are there really, cool jobs for developers here in South Carolina, in a place like this? We're not in California, we're not in New York. You know, I would love for you to kind of describe a little bit more about what your day-to-day work life looks like, and sort of,
Sure.
What is it like to be a programmer for Microsoft in South Carolina?
Sure. So, like I said, my title is consultant. So really, we work with Microsoft's biggest customers to kind of craft our tools, craft our technologies, help them do what they do better. So while I do live in Columbia and I do get to work remote some of the time, there's a lot of travel, a lot of state capitals. I do a lot of state local work in addition to federal work. So on any given week, I'll be traveling maybe 4 days a week. So starts nice and early at Columbia Airport, flying out for the week, on to customers' sites, meeting with them. A lot of the work I do now is in scoping work and gathering customers' requirements and looking at their architectures to make sure what they're doing, what they're trying to build is going to fit with where we're going. And then, between meetings, after hours in the hotel is when, unfortunately, these days that I'm actually getting to sit down, open up my development environment, and actually start working. So, it's been interesting. I think on some smaller projects or on some more short-term projects, I'll get requirements that are a lot more stable, that are a lot more kind of bounded in, and they say, we need you to build X, Y, and Z. And man, those are great. I could just put on the headphones. I'm like, I can build you X, Y, and Z. That's no problem. I think one of the things that I've seen developing in my career is, as you go from kind of junior developer to senior developer to lead and all of those, you take on more business problems. You take on less and less technology problems, and not to say that I don't work in technology, but just they assume that you'll solve those problems. That's just like a given, that you'll develop that website, you'll fix that bug in our app, you'll get this working. But more business problems of how can we get services to citizens faster? How can we make a sale faster? How can we do this cheaper? All of those things. So, which is really interesting, but can be difficult. Travel is definitely hard sometimes, and I'll level with you. A lot of times, I end up saving my technology problems for when I'm on the road. It's a lot easier to ignore the everything going on a flight or in the airport or something like that. Again, put in the headphones and I'm going to write code for an hour here. And do that. So a lot of times, I'm a little jealous of more junior developers, just because in some ways their jobs can be, hey, here's a list of bugs, here's a list of features, go ahead and one at a time knock them out.
Right. That's great.
I think I've been amazed, really, working with younger developers, how much more ready they are than maybe I was coming out. 20 years ago, thought I knew everything. Technology's just gotten so much more complex since then. And so, while we think of, junior developers, only maybe know one platform or one technology, really it's gotten a lot more complex and continues to every year.
Such a good point, Don. And I'm going to give you a quick second to check out your video, because you are frozen for us, I think, on video. I can hear you,
okay.
But as you're checking on that, for those of you who are watching, we are live with John Miller, who is one of our SE Codes mentors. He is here to kind of answer questions and tell you a little bit about his story, his pathway to becoming a developer in South Carolina, which is really one of our goals here at SE Codes, is to make sure that we are creating pathways for folks who are interested in kind of entering into technology, entering into programming. So if you have any questions for John, who is, again, one of our SC Codes mentors and also a principal consultant over at Microsoft, then please let us know in the chat. We are getting him back right now, so bear with us, and we will get John back. And John, let us know when you can hear us. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, or if you're at a place in kind of your learning path where maybe you've started a little bit of learning to code, but you are kind of still trying to figure out what that next step is for you, then John is a good person who can really answer that question. So we are going to get him back. He had just frozen here for a second, so let me get him back with us. And hold tight real quick. I know a couple of you have introduced yourselves, so thank you. And we are getting John back with us. Sorry about that, you guys. Skype sometimes just doesn't hang with us, but that is all right. John, are you back with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello. So
wouldn't be a live call if we didn't have technical issues.
No, that's all right. Thanks for hopping back on. I know we sometimes just have these little Skype issues. We do have a couple of folks with us from Ridgeville, South Carolina, Eric. Someone's here from Cleveland. So we've got a couple of folks here who are part of kind of the learning to code process. And if any of you guys have questions for John, please just let us know in the chat. John, I am sorry that I had to kind of cut you off a little bit earlier, but I know you were sort of talking about, not only your pathway, but sort of some of the tips that you had gotten, that you had received on kind of your career path, and as you kind of started with Microsoft, and then what that looks like for you today, and how it might be a little different from what that might have looked like when you were a bit more junior.
Yeah, I think, you talked earlier about, finding tech jobs in South Carolina, finding jobs. I've moved around a lot. I'm kind of a nomad like that. And a lot of places, the software community is defined by the industry. So down in South Florida, there was a lot more healthcare. There's more of that. And, in the DC area, you have more, government, technology. And so I think you're right. People hear, tech, and they think, oh, I have to move to New York. I have to move to Seattle. I need to move to, Silicon Valley, because I think about all the product companies, the ones that are making the tech tools. But I think, more and more, every company is a digital company, and really every company needs digital talent. And so I think there are a lot of ways that you can kind of find industries that you're interested in, and you'll probably find that there's a software industry around it.
That's such a great point. And you said you've been with Microsoft for 9 years, right?
Yes.
How has your job at Microsoft changed in 9 years?
Wow. So I think first and foremost, when I joined, cloud computing was not really a thing yet, was kind of brand new, and no one had ever really heard of it. So companies were really focused on, our special sauce, our technology. We do things in our data centers this way, things like that. And it was very manpower intensive, because, if you think of someone like Coca-Cola, they've got an incredible digital estate and all sorts of technology that needs to be maintained. Since then, I think more and more of those things have moved to, provider hosting, whether it's, Microsoft or Amazon or Google or any one of those, which I think is a really great thing. I think, I don't try to build my own electricity. The electric company does it better. I don't operate my own, water pump. The water company does it better. I think when it comes to data center hosting, I think these large tech companies are going to do it better than a hospital or a chicken processing plant or any of those. The flip side there is those tech companies, we don't know anything about chicken processing or water filtration or any of those things. So again, those companies are going to look for, domain experts, people who know their businesses, who can kind of take the best parts of different technologies and make it work for them. I think that's the biggest shift I've seen in the past 10 years.
I'm sure it's been pretty wild to see how much has changed in the last 10 years. If you can kind of speak to, really over the course of your career in technology, in kind of programming, what are some of the skills or, I guess, just important traits that, you would look for from someone who might be interested in kind of entering this world of programming, of technology, beyond just sort of that very technical, knowing how to write in a programming language?
Yeah, I think, that's important. And it seems like whenever you go in for those job interviews, they want you to know their particular stack that they're using that particular day. And so you always get those types of questions. I think beyond that, this is going to sound like some eat your vegetables and exercise type advice, but understanding, the fundamentals, while the industry does change a lot, computers are still, fundamentally the same things that they were 70 years ago. We still, have logic. We still have memory. We still have, input and output from disks. And so kind of understanding at those, at the very fundamental level, what is going on is important, because those fundamentals won't go away, even though they do get more complex over time. I think being able to think logically and explain your thinking is so important, and really for a couple reasons. I think one is in debugging your code. We all like to think that we write perfect code the first time. We never do. So the ability to kind of logically step through, okay, I know this part is working. I can, unit test this piece. I can isolate this piece and show that they're, working or not working, or I'm not getting the input or output that I expected, is so important for getting yourself unstuck. Similarly, I think the ability to communicate effectively, to break down very difficult and complex ideas into simple ones, and, use the proper levels of abstraction at different points in a conversation is so important to get teams unstuck. I talked a little bit earlier about how, maybe a junior developer is someone who knows how to write code. A senior developer is someone who knows how to, write an application or write a system. And a lead developer is someone who can, solve business problems. And so I think at all of those levels, the ability to either kind of zoom out or zoom deep into a problem can help people. I've seen so many times in my career where people are kind of stuck only thinking on their level of the problem and not looking at either the bigger picture or not being able to hear the very technical details that someone's trying to tell them that will have greater implications.
Awesome. We have a question from Scott, who is wondering about some of the aspects of what a principal consultant entails, which I know you touched on a little bit. And then he also asked if you would go a little bit deeper into how you acquired some of the training that you talked about. He said you talked about getting whatever training you could. So maybe some advice on where to look for that kind of training. Sure.
So, we'll start with the basics. Consultant is someone who fixes customers' problems for money. In some ways, we're very disposable labor. Companies will hire us to get a project done, to fix their problem, to do that. And then we're very transactional. That's done. Thank you very much. Handshakes. On to the next one. So it's very exciting work. It exposes you to a lot of different customers and a lot of different industries. But it can be very draining because it is transactional. Mm. You finish a project on Friday and you're not really sure what's going to happen on Monday. At a principal consultant, all of that is still the same. I think additionally, there's expectations for mentoring and kind of team building, making sure that the consultants and senior consultants and other team members have the understanding that they need to do their job, and providing both technical guidance and career guidance to them. There's also a pre-sales component to that. So a lot of companies don't know what they need or have an idea of a product they might want to build, and being able to scope that out for them, both to set their expectations. You don't want to promise something that you can't deliver, but figure out, what would that cost to develop? Is that still economical to build? If it takes this long, if you don't have the platform, all of those other things is a big part of the job. I think one of the things that's specific to Microsoft that may or may not happen at other consulting companies is there's an expectation that you're giving something back to the company. Kind of all of those other things, team building, pre-sales, customer delivery, those are all things you're doing for your customer. And that's good. That's, price of admission. I'm also expected to kind of create intellectual property for Microsoft itself. So I'm not only working for the customer, I'm working for Microsoft. So what are customers using? How are they using it? What do they have to customize? What do they have to do repeatedly that we could make easier for them? And so whether that's putting together toolkits for other consultants to use, whether that's putting together features for product teams to integrate back into our products, whether that's business process or kind of questionnaires for our management teams to use when engaging new customers, there's that additional expectation of you're making the company better while you're making our customers better.
Such a really interesting kind of a mix between the tech side and then really having to think through, from the customer's point of view, from your company's point of view.
And, it's funny because it goes right into the advice that I give a lot of my teams. And I think it goes to the second question of, that's a lot to do. And, we all only have the same amount of hours every week. And, we want to have a life outside of work. And so what I've found is the best way to be successful is find ways that enrich your customer, that should be repeatable for the company, that are something that you would want to do again, that are something that you would want to share. And ideally, if everything's lined up, are on technologies that you are interested in, or on technologies that you want to learn, or things like that. So I tell everyone, you really have to keep your eyes open for those, double credit, triple credit opportunities when you can find them. Just because trying to serve, 3 masters during the day is too much. And so you really have to look for those win-win-win opportunities, where your interests, the customer's interests, and the company's interests all kind of line up. In terms of training, a lot of that has been on me, to be perfectly honest, over the the last couple of years. I think earlier in my career, I was lucky enough to work for 2 companies. One who really wanted additional certified people. If you look for these big companies, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Amazon, they really invest in their partners. They want their partners to be technically astute, and they really want their partners to have certifications in whatever platforms and tools you're using. So if you're looking to start your career, I would definitely look at some of those partner companies, just because they are heavily incentivized to get people certified in technologies. So I was lucky enough to work for some partners who were also incentivized and interested in that, and so they would provide training pretty regularly. And I took, like I said, anything I could get my hands on, I would take. I took, server administration training, developer training across all sorts of development stacks, a lot of security training, anything I could get my hands on, just to kind of deepen those skills.
And you found a lot of those just online, John?
Those are available online, and I'll level with you. If you you go to the learning sites for all these big companies, follow some of the big names on Twitter. A lot of them offer free training, either in kind of one-day seminars or code camps. There's always free vouchers going around for take this certification exam for free, or get these training programs. So really, more and more and more of this is available free and online. 20 years ago, there was kind of the thought of a boot camp that your company would pay, several $1,000s to send you to a camp for a week, and you would take an exam at the end, and then you were certified. And what they found was the people that did that, some of them had the skills and were just getting the certification. Some of them were maybe showing up for 20 or 30 hours of training and sliding across the certificate at the end. So I see the industry moving more and more away from that and more to kind of bite-sized, snackable, just-in-time learning. And so I think there's more and more of it out there, whether it's guided platforms like SC Codes, whether it's on YouTube or sites like Pluralsight or a Cloud Guru or any of those things. And really, I'd follow people on LinkedIn and Twitter. So many people are giving away content these days. There's really a lot out there.
Yeah, that's great advice. Scott, thank you for that question. We have another question from Emily. So she is halfway through the front-end basics class, and she asks, what is a good way to learn elements for HTML? I'm feeling like I need to memorize everything, or is it better to just look up things as I go? And I think this is something I hear a lot about from programmers that I know about how much they Google things every day.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, it's great to have all of that memorized up and back and all that. The reality is that it's probably not going to happen. And even if it does, soon you're going to get better at JavaScript and web services and all of those things. And really, it's too much to hold in your head. So I wouldn't feel guilty at all about Googling things. I Google really embarrassing stuff like, hey, how does the for loop work in this language? Or what am I allowed to name variables? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And like I said, as you learn more and more, you're going to forget more and more too. So I think the fact that you know what you're looking for, that there are elements that can do these things is way more important than remembering, which attributes are available on each one of those. And to be perfectly honest, even if you do memorize it today, the browser developers are going to add new stuff next week anyway. So right. Absolutely no shame in searching for the latest and greatest.
Right. One thing I've heard from some developer friends and mentors is that in programming, I guess it's so much less linear. So of course, it depends on how you learn, what kind of learning style works for you. But I've had a lot of folks who've said, go through a course and then go, continue to learn something else and then come back and take a course again that you've already taken, because you have, you never know what you're going to kind of take out of that you didn't the first time.
That is such great advice, and I'll level with you. Even on the courses that I'm mentoring for SC Codes, I go ahead of the class and take them on my own. Just like you said, they're refreshers. They're things that you thought you knew, but that you never really put conscious thought around, or things that have just changed since the last time you learned them. So
absolutely,
definitely great advice.
Scott has another question about, can you describe some of the differences between an app and a program? And he's looking for advice on if it's easier to start out with an app. Can you speak at all to that, John?
Sure. So, to be perfectly honest, there probably isn't a whole lot of difference. I think today when we talk about app, we think about, something we install on our phone or something we download. And I think it's not about, a program is exactly the same thing. I think really it's just a matter of semantics. I think what I've seen in my career, I've done some app development on the side in the various app stores. It really comes down to the packaging. I was amazed the first time I made phone apps, how much of my time wasn't on programming, how much of my time wasn't on debugging the apps, but how much of my time was on making 35 different icons of different sizes to go on different phones and testing them to make sure they all looked good in the app store. I think more than any technical differences, the difference between an app and a program is really just marketing. It's having that splashy website. It's finding the business need. It's finding the users out there that want your app. It's marketing your app. It's kind of all of those things that go into it. Technically, there's no difference between a program that you write in an afternoon for HR to calculate new payrolls or a new app for your iPhone, but really it's just that packaging. If you think about a program, maybe it's for 1 or 2 or 10 users at your company, whereas an app could be downloaded by anyone around the world, which is true and cool, but that just means that now you have to test your app in 10 or 15 different languages and across 30 different phones and on different machines with different operating systems and different patches and all of those things. So technically, no difference. I think the mindset, though, that goes into, okay, I'm going to write an app and I'm going to create an app and I'm going to open up the App Store and look at the feedback that people write, even when it hurts. I think that mindset is the difference between an app and a program.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, that people kind of stumble into programming because they are frustrated by, a piece of technology that they're using that they think that could be improved, or maybe it's just that they have an issue in their day-to-day life that they feel like, hey, I feel like someone should create a thing to fix that particular issue or frustration.
I think that is so important. I think actually, the first apps that I wrote were kind of the same thing. It was I was fed up with some of the apps and how they worked, so I wanted to write my own. And yeah, it's definitely invigorating when people start downloading it. I'm like, oh, they liked my idea too. That's pretty cool. But in some ways, it is a labor of love. Everyone's real brave on the internet and always has something to say. So you've got to have thick skin and be ready to get some of that feedback.
That's, great advice. You guys keep the questions coming. I'm thrilled to know that some of you are working through some of the SC Codes modules. You may have seen that there are several courses that are called concepts. So there's JavaScript concepts, and Java concepts is our new course. Those are fairly short to go through, and so I definitely recommend those if you haven't started any of our courses yet. There's also a getting started guide if you haven't even touched SC Codes courses yet. Emily's halfway through front-end basics, which is definitely a more intense course, and we commend you for doing that, and keep it up, keep at it. John, will you kind of talk about what brought you to SC Codes and sort of made you want to become a mentor?
Sure. So, going back to the training thing, one of the things that I found that was really valuable as I was, moving between companies, learning all I could about different technologies, was going to in-person events, whether it was, user groups or code camps on the weekend or things like that. You get to meet so many people that are working in different companies or different industries, and they kind of open your eyes to, oh, I could be a developer doing, something over here. And they have, just deep, technical expertise, just because different companies are going to use different technologies. And so it's a great way to open your eyes. And so I had learned so much about those. I actually spent time for a while doing presentations at those, which is a great way to develop both kind of your soft skills, your presentation skills, as well as your technology skills. You never know it well enough until people start asking you questions and asking you to debug their problems. So it's a quick way to gut check yourself a little bit. So we moved to South Carolina about 5 years ago, and I'd been attending some user groups in the area, and got introduced to SC Codes. I want to say through Twitter. I saw it pop up, and I was like, oh, that would be cool. I would love to go. And so I went to a front end basics course, and introduced myself to the mentors, and was just trying to answer questions where I could. But I was amazed, while it was definitely a class for beginners, and there were some people, just following along doing the class, I was amazed. There were two young ladies in the class who were clearly building like a fashion website. And so all of their questions were very focused on, okay, how would I look up the price for something when someone moused over a picture? Or how could I zoom in on this picture if I wanted to do that? Another gentleman who was sitting next to me was a beekeeper. And so he was looking to program a Raspberry Pi to monitor the temperature of his beehives. And so I was really impressed that, not only was this a teaching platform, but people were bringing real world problems and solving them. And so that's just super motivational. And that, I saw that and I was like, oh, I definitely want to be a part of this.
Well, we're so glad you are. And, I think you touched on something that that I really love about SC Codes, just to be frank, but that I think is kind of part of the special element of what this is. Like, there are tons of different platforms where you can go and learn to code online, right? And
yes.
And, is what we put out there online that much more amazing and awesome as everything else? It's so much more about building a community of programmers, a learning community of folks who are supportive of each other in a really localized way. And while we've been doing that through some in-person courses at libraries it's all free, it's all with these awesome volunteer mentors like John. But that's really, I think what makes SC Codes special, and really what helps our learners get kind of a better understanding of, what does it really look like to be doing this work in the state of South Carolina? And the answer to that question is it can be very vastly different, right? Like we have a bunch of different mentors, and you all have very different jobs, but you all kind of have this love of programming and this desire to help others break into the field. And so I'm of course always grateful for our mentors like you who give of their time to make sure that the people who are learning have access to super smart programmers like you. And I think while that's the special part about it, and while we're in a weird moment right now where we're not able to do that in person, even just here on our Mentor Mondays, Q&A, we want to make sure that South Carolinians who are interested in getting into this know other South Carolinians who are doing this, which I think is cool.
It is cool. Although I will say, Leah, I really like the SC Codes platform for the ability to get in and actually write code.
Yeah.
Write code that will work all in the browser.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that was really hard for me when I first, was in school a long time ago. I learned it all in Java, and so I had problems, setting up the Java runtime environment and getting my development environment set up and clashing, environment setups on my computer. That's just hours of troubleshooting when you're just trying to learn the basics, is a huge, huge roadblock. And I think maybe one of the things, and I just want to reiterate it to everyone listening online, it all works in the browser. If you have a browser, you can go through and do all of the exercises. And so I think that is a really, really cool feature of SC Codes.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
And the flip side to that is, we've talked about it some. We've got all sorts of mentors across the state on our Slack channel. And so if you get stuck, please, please, please ask the question. I think both in the browser, in the classes, and also in our Slack channels, we want people to ask questions. You're not the first person to have these questions. You're not the first person, wanting more details on this. So anytime you get stuck, anytime you think you need a little more information, please reach out. We're glad to share all of that.
So great, John. Thank you. And we are going to be wrapping up pretty soon here. So any of you who are watching, again, you don't have to be a current student on SC Codes, but we'd love to kind of get to know a little bit more about you and what questions you may have while we still have John here. We are going to be hosting Mentor live Q&A sessions every Monday at 7 o'clock. So plan to meet us here every Monday if you've got other questions, if you just want to get to know and meet other mentors from across the state. We will be here. John, just to kind of wrap up, you've been so generous with your time and kind of explaining a lot about the journey that you have gone through to get to where you are. Can you speak to, if there are learners out there, folks who are interested in kind of working in development in South Carolina, a lot of the questions I get are about, what kind of certifications do I need? What kind of degrees do I need? What school do I need to go to? It's almost like we're all really programmed to follow one educational pathway to success. And in programming, we know that there's not just one. Can you speak a little bit to that from, your personal point of view and from the point of view of maybe a peer to other programmers and maybe even an employer?
Sure. So I think the first thing that I would say is, there are 100 tracks to get into the industry. And, I was laughing. I was on one project on DC where all the developers had degrees in business and psychology and history. And then all of the comp sci degrees were our testers and project managers and everyone else. So I was kind of looking around. I'm like, did we do something backwards here? I think more than getting the right degree or getting the right certification or any of those things, it really is a contact sport. So the more you can network with people at in-person events, or the code camps, like I said, or user groups, the more you can interact with people online, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Stack Overflow, on GitHub. I think that goes a long way, because if I, as a hiring manager, if I'm interviewing you, and I can look at your portfolio on GitHub and say, oh, I'm building websites for small businesses, and you have 3 examples of how you would do that. Okay, I believe you can do that. Or I'm helping you to, I'm hiring you to help my team get better, and I can see on Stack Overflow how you've answered 12 different questions with great examples. Well, that goes got a lot further than I got the right certification, or I got this degree. Not that those things aren't good. I think that if you're interested in those things, or they are available on the path that you're on, you should definitely do them. But I think that kind of social proof, whether in person or online, goes much, much further than any particular credential.
Awesome. John, thank you so much. For those of you who are watching, we are 100% here doing this work just for y'all. So please shoot us feedback. Let us know if you're enjoying these chats. Let us know what questions you have that we can be prepared to answer next time. I hope you will all join me in thanking John for his time, for being here today.
Thanks, all.
John, was there anything we did not go over that I forgot to ask you?
No, I mean, I think we hit on the big stuff. I think want to share the URL for our Slack and for SC Codes for anyone who's not doing it right now?
Yes, we can definitely do that, although I have to pull it up. I don't have my Slack up right now. I think we have that bit.ly, or actually, Kim, if you're watching, if you'll throw the link to our Slack channel up in the chat, I think that might be the best way to kind of get that up there. And yeah, that way, if you guys have questions in between our Monday Q&A times, we are always available on Slack and happy to help answer. And
happy to answer technology questions, happy to help you network with with developers in different parts of the state. And we've even got a Slack snack for developer skills to keep your skills sharp while we're all at home right now.
Yeah. And John, I don't know if you can see the comments, but Dan says, John, thank you for all this really great info. I'm getting ready to graduate a boot camp soon and get into the job market. And you've spoken to a lot of the concerns that I have. So thanks from Dan. And Dan, congratulations to you. If you have a second, let us know where you're graduating from and where you're located, and we'll be happy to help get you connected. For the rest of you, thank you so much for your time. We really value the ability to have this kind of Q&A with you guys, and we hope to see you again next Monday. John, thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you for setting this up, Leah.
And we will talk again very soon.